What happens when a fearless woman crosses paths with Seoul's most dangerous man? For Lena, one bold act of defiance against Beck Hyan Wu, the ruthless Mafia kingpin, was supposed to end her life. Instead, it ignited an obsession that would change everything. She never imagined her peaceful existence in Korea would collide with the city's most feared criminal. Loving him could destroy her. Defying him promised death. But when hatred transforms into forbidden desire, survival depends on a heart too dangerous to trust. If you're loving this story already, hit that subscribe button right now for KSoulStories. We bring you the most intense, heart-pounding Afro-Korean stories you won't find anywhere else. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Seoul's nightlife pulsed with electric energy. Neon signs cast their glow across rain-slicked streets, turning the city into a canvas of crimson and electric blue. Inside Lena's kitchen, a modest eatery squeezed between gleaming high-rises, warmth radiated from every corner. The scent of perfectly seasoned jollof rice, smoky suya, and caramelized plantains filled the air with an exotic promise most Koreans had never experienced. Lena moved through her restaurant with practiced grace, her dark skin glowing under the soft lighting. Her braids were gathered into an elegant updo, a few loose tendrils framing her face. She wasn't just the owner of this place. She was its heartbeat, its soul, cooking every dish, managing every detail, pouring her dreams into every plate that left her kitchen. This restaurant represented everything she'd sacrificed, every risk she'd taken leaving Lagos for Seoul. Table 7 needs more kimchi, whispered Mina, her young Korean assistant, nervously adjusting her apron. Lena glanced up from garnishing a plate. That's when the energy shifted. The entrance doors swung open, and a group of men dressed in immaculate black suits entered with the kind of presence that sucked oxygen from the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. Silverware froze halfway to my mouth. Even the background music seemed to lower in deference. The man leading them didn't simply walk. He owned every inch of space his body occupied. Tall, with shoulders that seemed carved from stone, his angular face could have been sculpted by an artist obsessed with perfection. His jet-black hair was styled with meticulous precision. The cut of his suit suggested it cost more than most people's monthly salary. Lena had been in Seoul long enough to recognize power when she saw it, and she'd heard the whispers about Beck Hyan Wu, the mafia lord who controlled the city's underworld like a chess master. A man so ruthless that entire organizations crumbled at the mention of his name. They said he'd never shown mercy, never smiled, and people who crossed him simply ceased to exist. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her spine straight. This was her territory. Hyan Wu and his entourage claimed the largest booth. His guards surveyed the restaurant with predatory attention, their message clear. Look away or face consequences. Lena forced confidence into her stride as she approached, menus clutched in steady hands. Good evening. Welcome to Lena's kitchen. Her voice carried strength, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Hyan Wu's gaze rose slowly to meet hers. His eyes were like black diamonds, cold yet somehow penetrating, capable of dissecting a person's soul with a single glance. He said nothing. Instead, he gestured dismissively for her to continue. Lena set down the menus carefully. Tonight's specials include, "Bring me whatever you believe deserves my attention," Hyan Wu interrupted, his voice silk wrapped around steel. Lena's jaw tightened. This wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in civility. Still, she nodded, masking her irritation behind professionalism. Of course. I'll prepare something special. In the kitchen, her hands moved with efficient precision, but her mind raced. Why tonight? Why her restaurant? The dining room had fallen into an uneasy hush. Customers exchanged worried glances, some clearly debating whether to flee, but too afraid to draw attention. When Lena returned carrying steaming plates of aromatic jollof rice, perfectly grilled suya skewers, and golden-fried plantains, Hyan Wu didn't acknowledge her effort. He simply examined the food with detached interest before eating with deliberate slowness, as if evaluating not just the meal but her worth. The entire restaurant watched him in suffocating silence. After several measured bites, he leaned back casually and dabbed his mouth with his napkin. His expression revealed absolutely nothing. Then, with shocking casualness, he swept his hand across the table, sending the plate crashing to the floor. The ceramic exploded against the tiles. Rich sauce splattered across the pristine floor. Gasps rippled through the room. Hyan Wu's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "You should feel honored I even tasted your food." Mina's hand flew to cover her mouth, tears already forming. The other customers stared at their tables, afraid to breathe too loudly. This was the script everyone knew. Stay silent, accept the humiliation, be grateful you survived. But Lena had never been good at following scripts. Heat flooded her face as fury ignited in her chest. Slowly, deliberately, she walked forward, her shoes crunching on broken porcelain. She stopped at the edge of his booth, chin raised, eyes blazing. Pay for the meal. The words dropped like stones into still water. Hyan Wu's head tilted slightly, those obsidian eyes narrowing with dangerous interest. What did you say? You heard me perfectly, Lena replied, her voice iron. You eat in my restaurant, you pay. You don't get to destroy my property and walk out like you own the place. The silence that followed felt apocalyptic. Even the air seemed to stop moving. One of his men shot to his feet, rage contorting his features. You dare speak to him like. See. Hyan Wu's command cracked like a whip, quiet but absolute. The man dropped back into his seat immediately. Now Hyan Wu stood, his full height towering over Lena. His presence was suffocating, like standing in the path of an avalanche. He leaned down until she could see a faint scar cutting across his sharp jawline. You have fire, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. But fire dies when it meets steel. Lena's heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs, but she refused to flinch. Her voice came out steady, challenging. And steel rusts when it meets water. Don't underestimate me, Beck Hyan Wu. The use of his full name made everyone in the restaurant gasp audibly. Nobody spoke his name. Ever. For the first time, genuine surprise flickered across his face. His lips curved into something between a smirk and disbelief. You dare. Ido. Her dark eyes never wavered. She grabbed the bill folder from the counter, scribbled the total with forceful strokes, and slapped it onto the table between them. That's 25,001. Cash or card? The tension shattered into stunned disbelief. His men tensed, hands moving toward concealed weapons, waiting for the order. Was this woman insane? Did she have a death wish? Hyan Wu studied her for what felt like an eternity. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes burned with something new. Not just anger or arrogance. Something deeper, more complex. He didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he stepped closer, so close she could smell the sophisticated cedar and smoke of his cologne. He lowered his voice to a dangerous whisper. You'll regret this. Then he turned and walked out, his men following like shadows. The bell above the door chimed softly, an absurdly cheerful sound in the heavy silence. The moment the door closed, the restaurant erupted into frantic whispers. Is she insane? She spoke to Beck Hyan Wu like that? She's dead. She just doesn't know it yet. Mina rushed to Lena's side, her hands trembling violently. Lena, what have you done? Lena bent down and began collecting the shattered pieces of ceramic, her face calm despite her racing heart. What needed to be done? She said simply. But as she dropped the fragments into the trash, she felt it deep in her bones. Tonight I rewrote her story. She'd challenged a king in his own kingdom, and kings never forget defiance. More importantly, they never forgive it. The morning after the confrontation, Lena's kitchen felt different. The usual morning rush of loyal customers had thinned to a trickle. Regular patrons who'd been coming for months suddenly had excuses. The atmosphere felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Lena arranged fresh pastries on the counter, but nobody lined up to buy them. Mina fidgeted at the register, glancing nervously toward the entrance every few seconds. Do you think he'll retaliate? Mina finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lena paused, wiping her hands on a towel. She'd barely slept, haunted by those penetrating dark eyes and that whispered promise. You'll regret this. She straightened her shoulders, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. If he does, he'll find me still standing. Mina looked at her like she was witnessing someone signing their own death warrant. Lena, people disappear after defying him. Do you understand? They just vanish. Lena forced a smile. I didn't come all the way from Lagos to disappear. But deep inside, doubt gnawed at her confidence. She'd seen enough in this city to understand that power like Hyan Wu's wasn't theatrical. It was real, absolute, and devastating. And before the week ended, she learned exactly what that kind of power could do. It started subtly. Her primary rice supplier, the only vendor who stocked the specific brands she relied on, called with stammering apologies. I'm so sorry, Lena SSI, but we can no longer deliver to your restaurant. Why not? Lena demanded, pressing the phone tight against her ear. Silence stretched across the line. Then a heavy sigh. Orders from above. Don't call us again. The line went dead. By afternoon, 2 more suppliers had terminated their contracts. By evening, even her packaging supplier had canceled. The company providing her takeout containers, disposable utensils, everything, simply refused to service her anymore. Lena stood in her kitchen that night, hands gripping the counter's edge, staring at shelves that had been full yesterday but now looked disturbingly bare. She didn't need a detective to figure out who orchestrated this. Beck Hyan Wu. The man didn't need to return and make threats or destroy her restaurant again. His silence was more terrifying, his reach more absolute than any direct confrontation. When she locked up that night, a sleek black car idled across the street. Tinted windows concealed whoever watched from inside, but she felt their eyes tracking her every movement. Her skin prickled with unease, but she lifted her chin and walked home without quickening her pace, refusing to show fear. Days bled together. Business continued its slow death. The few regulars who still came offered weak excuses about being busy, but Lena saw the truth in their eyes. Nobody wanted to risk Beck Hyan Wu's wrath. Still, she refused to close her doors. Every morning, she cooked with whatever ingredients remained. Every evening, she cleaned tables that barely saw customers. But each night, that same black car appeared across the street, a silent reminder that she was being watched, studied, evaluated. One evening after locking up, Lena turned to find a man in an expensive black suit standing directly behind her. She stumbled backward, her heart leaping into her throat. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man bowed slightly, his face professionally blank. "A messenger. My employer requests your presence." Her fists clenched. "And if I refuse?" His expression didn't change. "Then we'll wait." "But my employer doesn't appreciate being kept waiting." Lena inhaled deeply, her chest tight with dread, but she refused to be dragged anywhere like livestock. "Tell your employer," she said with deliberate firmness, "that if he wants to see me, he can come to my restaurant himself." Something flickered in the man's eyes. Surprise, perhaps. But he simply bowed again and left, disappearing into the black car. Lena stood there alone as cold wind whipped around her, her legs feeling like lead, but her spirit burning brighter than ever. The retaliation escalated dramatically. One morning, she arrived at the restaurant to find the windows completely shattered. Glass glittered across the floor like deadly diamonds. Tables were overturned, chairs broken. Someone had spray-painted crude symbols across her walls in dripping red paint. Symbols she didn't recognize but instinctively knew belonged to Hyan Wu's world. Mina burst into tears the moment she saw the destruction. "We need to quit, Lena. Please. This isn't worth our lives." Lena stood amid the wreckage, fists trembling at her sides. For a moment, despair clawed at her throat with sharp fingers. But then she remembered why she'd come to Seoul, why she'd fought so hard to build this place from nothing. Her late mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Stand tall, Lena. The world only bows to those who refuse to bend." With steady hands, she picked up a broom. "We clean up. We open tomorrow. Same as always." Mina stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had, but surrendering would mean Beck Hyan Wu had won. And Lena hadn't come this far to lose. That night, as she scrubbed the last traces of red paint from her walls, the door opened without warning. The sound of expensive leather shoes against her floor made her freeze mid-motion. Slowly, she turned. There he stood, Beck Hyan Wu. No entourage this time. No guards in black suits. Just him, standing in her doorway like he owned the very air she breathed. He stepped inside, streetlight casting his shadow long and ominous across the floor. His sharp black suit was immaculate, his presence overwhelming despite being alone. Lena straightened, gripping the cleaning rag like a weapon. "Come to admire your handiwork?" Hyan Wu's lips curved into the faintest smirk. "Not yet. I'm impressed you haven't closed." His gaze swept across the half-cleaned walls, the broken glass still piled in corners. Then his eyes returned to hers, sharp as surgical blades. "You could have made this simple," he said softly. "All you had to do was bow your head." He gestured vaguely at the destruction. "But instead you fight." Lena's chest rose and fell with measured breaths. "Because this place is mine. I won't let anyone take it from me. Not even you." Hyan Wu stepped closer. The air seemed to thicken around him, heavy with unspoken tension. His eyes locked onto hers, unreadable yet intensely searching. "You don't fear me," he murmured, more a statement than a question. Lena swallowed hard, her throat dry. Fear coiled inside her like a serpent. Yes, she was terrified, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing it. "Maybe I do," she admitted, "but I won't let fear control me." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of the city outside. Then, unexpectedly, Hyan Wu chuckled. The sound was low, dark, and sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. "You're either incredibly brave," he said, moving closer still, "or remarkably foolish." He leaned in slightly, close enough that she caught the cedar and smoke of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "And I can't decide which possibility interests me more." With that, he turned sharply and left, the door closing softly behind him. Lena stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she felt it in her temples. She'd expected fury, violence, perhaps even her death. But what she'd seen in his eyes unsettled her far more than any threat. Because in that brief, charged moment, she wasn't entirely sure if Beck Hyan Wu wanted to destroy her, or if he'd just discovered his newest obsession. Thank you so much for watching so far. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button for KSoulStories right now. We're just getting to the good part, and you'll want to be notified when we drop the next episode. Subscribe now. The morning after Hyan Wu's unexpected visit, Lena woke with his smirk burned into her memory. She lay in bed staring at her ceiling, her heart still unsettled from the night before. His voice echoed through her thoughts, low and taunting yet oddly intrigued. "You're either incredibly brave or remarkably foolish, and I can't decide which possibility interests me more." Lena shook her head, forcing the memory away. She couldn't afford to think about him, especially not like that. He was danger wrapped in sophistication, a predator who smiled while showing his teeth. She'd survived this long in Seoul by keeping her head down and working hard, not by dancing with devils. Still, she couldn't ignore the unease gnawing at her chest. Something had shifted in him that night. She'd seen it in his eyes, a spark that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with fascination. And Beck Hyan Wu's fascination was the last thing she needed. At the restaurant, Lena tried focusing on cooking, on cleaning, on keeping her dream alive. But she noticed it immediately. New faces appeared among her sparse customers. Men and women who didn't quite fit the profile of normal patrons. Their eyes lingered too long. Their questions about her dishes sounded rehearsed. They paid in cash, tipped extravagantly, and left without finishing their meals. Spies, watching her, reporting back to him. Mina noticed too. "Lena," she whispered, trembling as she returned plates to the kitchen. "Those people, they frighten me." Lena gave a tight smile. "They'll get bored eventually." But she didn't believe her own words. That evening, as she walked home through narrow alleys between apartment buildings, Lena realized someone was following her. The sound of footsteps mirrored hers through the shadows. She stopped. The footsteps stopped. Her pulse quickened. Spinning around, she saw him. Beck Hyan Wu. He wasn't wearing a suit this time. A simple black coat covered his frame, his hair falling more casually over his forehead, but his presence remained suffocating. He leaned against the alley wall as though he'd been waiting for her all along. Lena's voice came out sharper than intended. "Are you stalking me now?" His lips curved faintly. "Stalking is such an ugly word. I prefer observing." "Observing?" she repeated incredulously. He pushed off the wall, his movements fluid and predatory. "You fascinate me, Lena." She stiffened. "I didn't ask to fascinate you." "That's the problem with fire," Hyan Wu murmured, stepping closer. "It doesn't ask to be noticed. It just burns, and everyone around it has no choice but to feel the heat." Her breath caught, but she forced herself not to step back. "If you've come to intimidate me again, it won't work." "Intimidate?" His voice was velvet over steel. "No, Lena. If I wanted to intimidate you, you wouldn't be standing here." Her heart hammered, but she refused to look away. "Then what do you want?" His gaze swept over her face slowly, deliberately, as if searching for something hidden beneath her defiance. "Honestly," he said softly, "I haven't decided yet." The answer chilled her more than any direct threat could have. Over the following week, his presence became undeniable. Everywhere Lena went, she felt him or his shadows. At the market, she'd spot a man in a black coat watching from across the stalls. On the subway, she'd feel eyes burning into her until she turned, catching only the faintest glimpse of someone vanishing into the crowd. And sometimes, when she looked up from her kitchen window late at night, she swore she saw him across the street, standing beneath the streetlight, smoke curling from a cigarette in his hand. He didn't come inside. He didn't speak. He just watched. And somehow, that was worse. Her remaining customers continued dwindling. Word spread quickly through Seoul's interconnected communities. Lena's kitchen was no longer safe. Some whispered she was under Mafia protection. Others claimed she'd angered them. Either way, ordinary people avoided her restaurant, and the empty tables didn't break her spirit as much as the crushing loneliness did. One night, after closing the restaurant, she sat at a table and buried her face in her hands. Her chest ached with exhaustion, frustration, and fear she refused to show anyone. Crying doesn't suit you. Her head snapped up. Hyan Wu stood by the doorway, his tall figure framed by dim streetlight. He'd slipped in without a sound, as though the shadows themselves had granted him passage. Lena shot to her feet, wiping her face hastily. "You again?" "Me again," he echoed smoothly, stepping closer. "Why do you look surprised?" "Because normal people knock." His smirk deepened. "Do I look normal to you?" She exhaled sharply, crossing her arms defensively. "Why are you here?" He studied her for a long moment, then said simply, "Because I wanted to be." The audacity made her laugh bitterly. "You've ruined my business. You've terrorized my staff. And now you show up because you wanted to." His expression didn't shift, but his eyes flickered briefly with something unguarded. "I told you, Lena. You fascinate me. No one talks to me the way you do. Maybe that's because everyone else has the sense to stay alive," she snapped. For a moment, silence hung between them like a living thing. Then, unexpectedly, Hyan Wu chuckled. It wasn't cruel this time. It was low, genuine, and startlingly warm. Lena blinked, genuinely shocked. She'd never heard him laugh before. The sound unsettled her more than his threats ever had. "Do you know how long it's been," he said softly, almost to himself, "since someone dared speak to me like that?" She clenched her jaw, refusing to be swayed by whatever game he was playing. "Maybe you need more people telling you the truth." Hyan Wu's gaze locked onto hers with burning intensity. Then he stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You're fire, Lena." His lips curved into a dangerous smile. "And I've been cold for far too long." Her breath hitched. For the first time since meeting him, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear, not anger, but something far more dangerous. An unwanted pull. That night after he left, Lena sat alone in her restaurant long after midnight, her thoughts a chaotic storm. She should hate him. She should want nothing to do with him. He was chaos incarnate, danger in human form, ruin dressed in expensive suits. And yet her fingers trembled as she remembered the way his eyes had softened for just a second. The way his laughter had sounded like a man rediscovering something he'd forgotten he could feel. It terrified her more than his threats because she realized with a sinking heart that Beck Hyan Wu wasn't just testing her will anymore. He was pulling her into his world thread by thread, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could resist. The restaurant felt heavier with each passing day. Lena still opened her doors each morning, but the air inside felt hollow. Tables sat untouched, perfectly arranged but empty. Chairs stacked neatly against walls. The smell of her cooking couldn't fill the silence anymore. Mina had stopped coming altogether. One night after closing, Lena found a note slipped under the door, the handwriting shaky. "I'm sorry, Lena. I can't do this anymore. Please stay safe." Lena held the note tightly, her throat aching. One by one, everyone was abandoning her. Not because they didn't care, but because they were terrified. And who could blame them? When Beck Hyan Wu set his sights on you, your world crumbled. But she refused to crumble. Or at least, that's what she told herself until the night everything changed. It was late when she closed, well past midnight. The streets were mostly deserted, neon signs flickering faintly in the distance like dying stars. She locked her restaurant door and turned, only to find 2 black cars parked at the curb, engines purring quietly. Her stomach dropped. From the first car, 3 men in suits emerged. Silent, broad-shouldered, living shadows of Hyan Wu's empire. One of them bowed slightly. "Lena SSI, our employer requests your company." Lena's grip tightened on her bag. "And if I refuse?" The man straightened, his face completely expressionless. "Then we'll be forced to insist." Her breath caught, but she forced her chin up. "Tell your employer if he wants to see me, he can come to my restaurant himself." The man didn't flinch. He simply opened the car door, his voice eerily calm. "Please don't make this more difficult than necessary." For a moment, Lena considered running. But where would she go? Who could protect her? She was alone in this massive city, and Beck Hyan Wu had already proven he could reach her anywhere, anytime. So she exhaled slowly, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the car with her head held high. The drive was silent, the city lights flashing by in streaks of gold and electric blue. Lena kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, refusing to show her trembling fingers. Finally, the cars stopped in front of a tall, secluded building overlooking the Han River. Not a flashy skyscraper, but a fortress disguised as architecture. The men led her inside. Marble floors gleamed under dim mood lighting. The air smelled faintly of expensive leather and smoke. Everything about the place whispered wealth, power, and danger. And then she saw him. Beck Hyan Wu sat at the head of a long table in a private lounge, his suit immaculate as always, a glass of amber whiskey resting in his hand. He looked up as she entered, and a slow smile curved his lips. "You came," he said, as if surprised. Lena glared at him. "I didn't have much choice." "Choice?" Hyan Wu repeated, swirling the liquid in his glass thoughtfully. "Everything is a choice, Lena. You chose to step into my car. You chose not to scream. You chose to face me. And you chose to terrorize my life," she snapped. His smile widened. "Did I?" "Yes," she hissed. "You cut off my suppliers, scared away my customers, destroyed my restaurant, all because I told you to pay for your meal." For a moment, his expression hardened, his obsidian eyes narrowing dangerously. Then, just as quickly, he leaned back in his chair, amusement flickering across his face. "Do you know," he said softly, "that no one has spoken to me like that in 10 years? Lena's chest tightened. "Maybe because they have better survival instincts. Or maybe," Hyan Wu murmured, setting his glass down with deliberate care, "because they lack the fire you have." He stood, his tall figure moving closer with each deliberate step. The air grew heavier with each inch of distance he closed until he was standing directly before her. "You fascinate me, Lena," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you know what happens to people who fascinate me?" She swallowed hard, refusing to step back. "They disappear." His lips curved. "Sometimes. And sometimes they burn so brightly I can't look away." Her heart raced, every instinct screaming at her to flee. Yet her feet stayed planted, her body trembling with a confusing mix of fear and defiance. "What do you want from me, Hyan Wu?" she demanded. For a long moment he said nothing. His gaze locked onto hers, intense, unrelenting, searching for something he couldn't name. Then he leaned down slightly, his words a whisper only she could hear. "Everything." Lena's breath hitched, her chest tightening. "You can't have me." He smirked. "Can't. Or won't. Both." The words slipped from her lips like a blade. And for the first time, Hyan Wu's smirk faltered. His expression darkened, his jaw tightening, but not with rage. With something else, something heavier, more consuming. Obsession. He didn't force her that night. Didn't touch her. Didn't even threaten her. Instead, he let her go, his men driving her back through the silent city, her heart pounding the entire way. But when Lena lay in bed hours later, staring at her ceiling, she realized the truth. He hadn't let her go. He had pulled her deeper. Because from that night on, she wasn't just fighting for her restaurant anymore. She was fighting for herself, for her freedom, for the fragile line between her world and his. And deep down, she feared it was already too late. The next day, when she opened Lena's kitchen, there was a bouquet of white orchids waiting on the counter. Pristine, elegant, expensive. No note, no signature. But she didn't need one. She knew exactly who had sent them. And as she stared at the flowers, her stomach knotted with dread and something far more dangerous. Because for the first time since meeting Beck Hyan Wu, Lena wasn't sure if she hated him, or if she was terrified of how much a part of her wanted to understand what it meant to be wanted by a man like him. The first snow of winter fell softly over Seoul, transforming the city into something almost magical. Streets glistened with frost, neon lights reflecting against icy sidewalks like scattered jewels. Lena's kitchen had slowly reopened over recent weeks, brighter than before, with fresh paint, new tables, and customers finally daring to return. But even now, as she ladled steaming bowls of pepper soup for a table of curious Korean university students, Lena could feel eyes on her. Not just the curious stares of customers, but the invisible weight of him. Beck Hyan Wu. Since that night at his fortress, he had never been far. Sometimes she'd see a sleek black car idling across the street. Sometimes a stranger would enter, order nothing, and leave minutes later. She knew it was his way of watching her without intruding. And though she told herself she hated him, her heart always raced when she felt him near. It was nearly midnight when she finally closed the restaurant. The streets were quiet, snowflakes drifting lazily through the darkness like frozen stars. She wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck and turned to lock the door, only to freeze completely. He was there. Beck Hyan Wu stood across the street, alone this time, no guards flanking him. His black coat was dusted with snow, his sharp jawline pale in the winter light. Their eyes met across the empty street. Lena's heart slammed against her ribs, her breath fogging in the cold air. "What do you want, Hyan Wu?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt inside. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed the street with deliberate steps, each footfall crunching softly in the fresh snow. When he stopped in front of her, he was close enough that she could see the faint tremble in his hand as he pulled something from his pocket. Not a weapon. A velvet box. Lena's lips parted in shock. "You can't be serious." "I am," Hyan Wu said, his voice low but unshakable. "I have destroyed empires for less than what you did to me. You humiliated me, defied me, challenged me to my face, and yet—" His voice cracked just slightly. "I've never wanted anything more in my life than to be yours." Lena's breath hitched. The Mafia king, the man feared throughout all of Korea, stood before her in the falling snow, kneeling. Yes, kneeling. The velvet box opened, revealing a simple silver band. No diamonds, no elaborate jewels, just a ring, plain and unadorned, but undeniably real. "I can give you wealth," he whispered, eyes locked on hers with burning intensity. "I can give you power. I can destroy every person who's ever looked at you with disrespect. But none of that matters if I can't have your heart. So I'm begging you, Lena. Don't be my possession. Be my equal. Be my queen." The world seemed to stop. The city sounds faded. The snow hung suspended in the air. And all Lena could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat. "Hyan Wu," her voice shook. "Do you even understand what you're asking? I'm not like you. I don't belong in your world of guns and shadows and blood. You belong wherever you choose to be," he said fiercely, rising to his feet, his eyes burning with raw emotion. "And if that means I must tear down my world to build yours, I will do it without hesitation." Tears stung her eyes. She had fought him, cursed him, resisted him at every turn. And yet here he was, choosing her, humbling himself for her, a man who had never bowed to anyone. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "And if I say no?" Hyan Wu's jaw tightened. "Then I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I am worthy, until you say yes." The sincerity in his words broke something inside her. Slowly, Lena stepped forward. Her fingers reached out, brushing against his cold cheek. He closed his eyes at her touch like a man who'd been starved of warmth for years. "Beck Hyan Wu," she whispered. "You terrify me. You infuriate me. But you also—" She swallowed hard, her tears finally falling. "You make me feel alive in a way I never thought possible." His eyes snapped open, searching hers desperately. "Does that mean—" "Yes," she breathed. "But on one condition." "Anything," he said instantly, without hesitation. "You learn to love me as your equal," she whispered firmly. "Not as your possession, not as your prize. As Lena, the woman who will stand beside you, not beneath you." For a moment, silence hung between them, thick with unspoken promises. Then slowly, Beck Hyan Wu smiled. Not the cold, mocking smirk she had come to know, but a real smile, soft, vulnerable, and raw. "As you wish, Lena." He slipped the ring onto her finger. The silver band gleamed under the falling snow, catching the light like a promise. And when he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that burned hotter than any fire, Lena knew the truth. The Mafia king had bowed not just to her love, but to her strength. He hadn't conquered her. She had conquered him. And that's the end of this incredible story. If you love this journey, make sure you're subscribed to KSoulStories. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling us what you thought. Should we do part 2? Let us know. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.